Welcome to another episode of Making Risk Flow. Today, I'm joined by Sam Lewis. We've been working together for the last 5 years. It's always been a pleasure working together. But why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, Sam?
Yeah, thanks, Juan. Well, first of all, thanks for the invite. I started to think it was never going to come, but 5 years and 7 series in, I could tick it off the bucket list now, so great to be here. I'm Sam. I lead product engineering and data at Cytora. I've been with the business this is my 7th year with the business. I went back and checked the other day. So yeah, I've really been here since the incarnation of what we call the Cytora platform today. In terms of the role at Cytora, I think the best way of describing myself is a massive generalist. So I use this phrase, jack of all trades, master of none, as you know, Juan. At heart, I'm a builder. I love to build things. I love to build things that people like to use, find really valuable, and can be operated at scale. So I get to achieve all of those things at Cytora.
Sorry, it's great to have you, Sam. In the podcast, we used to say in life you have to plant a tree, have a child, and write a book. And now the fourth thing is join Making Risk Flow. So I think you've got most of them now done. So well done. So you proposed that let's jump straight into kind of a zoomed out view of, we've been talking about the risk digitization for a number of years now. Let's start with what's worked well and what hasn't. What have been the successes and the shortcomings of risk digitization?
Yeah, if I think back to when we started work on, what we call the Cytora platform today, the whole industry, I think, was at sort of ground zero. I was new to insurance 6.5 years ago. And I had to kind of learn sort of very quickly about the dynamics in the industry. There's some very systemic factors which really impact the types of solutions which you can bring to market. And the industry had really been trying to achieve this concept of risk digitization for many years. So many verticals, many industries had gone digital, but risk, and in particular commercial risk, had really struggled to do that. And one of the kind of initial lessons that we had was that almost all of the solutions that the market had attempted required significant behavioral change on the part of market participants, and in particular where risk is sourced from. And that was really kind of the big challenge that the industry faced. So there's a lot of demand for going digital, but really a lot of struggles in terms of achieving it. So one of the foundational design principles of the platform is, look, if we're going to make this successful, we have to achieve risk digitization without any behavioral change, particularly from where the risk is sourced from. And that's kind of flowed the whole way through. So when we looked at it from that perspective, what we found was that there was a foundational problem to solve, that risk information was transferred into carriers in a format which we described as being analog, so email-based document format. Excel, PDFs, Words, PowerPoints, handwritten documents, scanned images of things. And this is what we now term the intake. And the big challenge for carriers is that they receive stuff that in the intake that they're not in control of. So for the first few years of the platform, we really focused on solving this foundational problem of taking unstructured data and harmonizing it to a structured digital format. So at the end of that, you get a digital risk object or a digital risk packet. And one of the other interesting things that we also found is that when you try to make things digital, one of the things that you're most tempted to do at the start is to try and drive standardization. So you think, well, wouldn't it be amazing if everybody just submitted the same risk information? Wouldn't it be amazing if all of the carriers just required exactly the same risk information? And even if we could only do it on one side of the market, even on the carrier side, that would actually make things a lot easier for us. And so that was probably the first few weeks of kind of discussions in the product team 6 years ago. And then what I realized was that actually this source of differentiation between carriers is actually their source of competitive differentiation. And that's not only important for the carriers themselves, but it's also really important for the end insured. I had an anecdote that really stuck in my mind when we were dealing with an MGA that focused on specialist risks, and they underwrote paper mills. And there was obviously whole market insurers, and they would completely decline all paper mill risks. But this MGA had a way of, through, I think actually interestingly, like employee reviews on the internet and things like this, of identifying really well-run paper mills. And so this kind of concept of differential data, differential schemas, really hit home to me as being really important for the industry and for the end insured. And so those have really driven kind of what we've done from a risk digitization perspective. And as you know, that the centrality of the platform is based upon a schema, so you can define your own output data structure, and we harmonize this unstructured data into a format that you've defined, and it can be completely custom for every individual line of business, for every individual carrier. And in terms of the benefits that we saw there, probably three main benefits, I would say. A huge uplift in capacity. So when we came into kind of work on the product, a lot of time and effort was spent on basically administrative type activities before you get to the underwriting stage. So often we work in what we call the pre-underwriting phase. And to my amazement, when I first went to the industry, like the figures people quoted were, I receive 1,000 submissions every month and I only get back to 500 of them. Literally only 500 receive a response. I don't even look at the other 500. And of course, the issue is compounded because within those 500, you might have 400 which are fantastic risks that you want to write, or it could be the reverse of that, or the 400 you really want to write and the 500 you don't get to. So that was kind of number one. You really had this ability to, without going on a first in, first out basis through the queue, really understand like which risks are the ones you want to focus on, and you had the ability to analyze the whole intake. So I think that's like super important. Off the back of that, it drove significant improvements in broker service and responsiveness. This is like one of the key objectives for most customers in the industry. And what also stuck with me is there was often a line from brokers is, a quick decline is often better than a very late kind of acceptance of the risk, right? So just to know that this isn't a relevant market for the broker was really important. And the other one, which I think was kind of less focused on the early days, was because it was these risk objects were in digital format. You can actually achieve much more consistent risk selection. So actually, one of the things, interestingly, in the early days, you'd speak to customers and say, well, what's the accuracy of your platform? And they'd say, wait, it's 92.3, whatever, I'm making the number up, 92.3%. Oh, wow, what is going on here? Like, what about the other 6.x%? And then you'd have a workshop with them and you'd say, well, what is the current accuracy of your human process today? And they'd say, oh, well, actually, we have an SLA of 80% with our business process outsourcing provider. Well, okay, so what's actually going on here? So obviously the expectation with machines is that they don't get tired, they don't make mistakes, they don't forget things. And so you get this concept of much more consistent risk selection. So I would say those were most of the kind of the main benefits in the early days from going from analog to digital in terms of low hanging fruit.
Understood. Yeah. And I think that those three, that's probably quite consistent every time you talk to a carrier. Those are probably the three highest priority things. Like, how do you create capacity to accelerate growth? How do you improve your service to brokers, which ultimately drives in higher volume of risks being shared with you and also higher conversion rates? And how do I provide the best insights to my underwriters to make an underwriting decision? Okay, but I mean, that's success. So it sounds like the three really important areas. What have been the shortcomings of the approach so far, and kind of what are the things you're focusing on in terms of unlocking the next set of value?
Yes, I think there's probably two main shortcomings that come to mind. The first one is a lot of the benefits that you kind of unlock are somewhat dependent on the quality of the intake still, right? Because it's kind of like one shot. If you think about the analogies of interacting with large language models, when we started using large language models as individuals 2 years ago, it was very much kind of prompt and response. So you put a prompt in, you get a response back, and you kind of get an output, and then if you want to follow up later, you kind of have to like re-prompt the model and say, well, oh, actually, you remember that thing that we spoke about last thing? Of course, it didn't remember at that particular point in time. I've got a bit more information. Can we follow up on it? And we had this kind of same situation with risks that come in. So to kind of give some flavor in terms of numbers, I've got a customer who writes cyber risks, and only in about 60% of cases, is there sufficient information in the first email from the broker to evaluate the minimum top 10 controls that basically are the knockout questions. So it kind of really depends on, do you have enough information on that kind of first shot email to be able to kind of derive most of the benefits? Obviously, in the 40% of cases, information is missing for all sorts of reasons. And then humans have to intervene and orchestrate the workflow. So there's a lot of focus on this term orchestration. And so whilst we've been able to provide like huge uplift in benefits in certain parts of workflows, the bits that connect those parts of the workflow still have to be predominantly done by humans. So there's a lot of human orchestration. And so if you look at the end-to-end kind of sort of wartime, you have a lot of this kind of waiting back and forth. The other one, which is quite interesting, is that's because of that, we generally saw in the early days a lot of focus on the left-hand part of the process. So we would typically turn these kind of submission, setup, and clearance parts of the process, where actually a lot of the initial capacity is lost. So one of the interesting things is even before it hits an underwriter, it can spend days just literally getting through the system before it even gets to an underwriter to kind of start that back and forth to the broker. And what we increasingly saw on the platform through kind of discussions with customers and schemas that they were creating, fields that they were doing, things that they were trying to do with the flexibility of the platform, because they were really wanting to basically automate larger parts of the workflow. So even going beyond the pre-underwriting phase. And I've had a lot of discussions recently about even stuff post-bind, like could you actually automate part of the post-bind activities? Well, so I think those are the two key challenges that we've found over the last few years, moving beyond risk digitization to something a bit more kind of holistic from an end-to-end workflow perspective.
And then you often refer to those two challenges as the root cause is many solutions are I think you refer to it as stateless, right? They are quite transactional. They receive something, do something with it, move on. Can you explain more a bit of the concept of what stateless means?
Yeah. So I guess the sort of breakthrough period for us in terms of the ability to deliver on our long-term vision was the advent of large language models. And I think even my wife, who's a nurse in the NHS, has used a large language model now. So they become ubiquitous. But anybody who's used a large language model will have experienced this concept of statelessness. So if you just interact with a large language model by default and you have a conversation with it today, you say, send me some hotels from Mexico, and then you come back the next day and start a new conversation. And you say, well, you remember those those hotels in Mexico that we're looking at, that the LLM doesn't have any concept of the fact that you had that previous conversation. And the same happens in risk digitization. So if I send you an email today in what we call digitize, which is our core service, which allows you to create a schema or a config and send it unstructured data that gets harmonized to that schema. If I send an email into digitize today that says, hey, Juan, I've got a cyber risk, great business, $10 million revenue, online gambling business, XYZ. I'll send you the loss run information tomorrow, and you need that loss run information to complete your schema. What you get from an output, similar to how you would prompt and get a response from a large language model, is a partially completed, basically, risk object. And then if you follow up on your promise tomorrow and say, oh, hey, Sam, here's that loss information which I sent you, and maybe you've sent it on a different channel. You've created a completely new email thread, not necessarily replied to the one you sent yesterday. What you end up with is another partially completed risk object with the loss information. And the system, because it's stateless, doesn't know that these two things relate to each other. So what does that mean from a challenge perspective? It means that there has to be some other thing that does the orchestration that basically merges these two things together. So you obviously get the benefits that you don't have to read the email, copy the information out and rekey it into multiple systems, but you do have to do a lot of orchestration to basically merge the data into the object which you need, which in this case is a submission.
Understood. And this sounds very much like the concept of agentic AI, right? Versus just like pure LLM, the use of LLMs. Is this right?
Absolutely, yeah. It very much follows the path over the last couple of years, although obviously things are moving at a greater speed. And actually, interesting. One of the insights here is that in the early days, I would say 2 years ago, we used to get a lot of questions, right, about which LLMs do you use? Are you fine tuning them? And is it Gemini? Is it GPT? Is it XYZ? And now a lot of those conversations have largely gone away. And I think it's because basically the models are the foundational models are basically as good as they need to be, right, to unlock the use cases that we want to deliver on. So there's much that focus on the capabilities of the models. What does that mean? It means that the focus is moved to the application level, which is where we're focused on. And so when we talk about agentic AI, a lot of that is leveraging the capabilities of the foundational models, but building an application layer around it to deliver on basically a promise of automation by default or an always on kind of concept, right? So as opposed to LLMs in their raw format 2 years ago, where they were there and you basically get prompt and response and then you kind of decide what to do next, you can really deliver on this promise that you have this autonomous flow of processes and then human oversight or human intervention when needed. And that's basically loosely described as agentic AI. And I think one of the key enablers for agentic AI systems is the ability for agents to basically undertake actions on an ongoing basis on the same thing, is a concept that the industry generally refers to as memory. So these LLMs remember or have memory inbuilt into them. But obviously, if you want to kind of like maintain a stateful workflow, it needs to have this concept of memory. And there are obviously like many solutions out there in the market, but in domains like insurance, there's obviously a need for a vertical specific implementation of that. And I guess like everybody else, we've really felt the inflection point of agentic AI in the latter half of last year with things like Opus 4.6, Gemini 3. A lot of people were talking about agentic AI 2 years ago, but the models weren't there, the applications weren't sufficient to be able to deliver on it. But post this inflection point, we're really feeling that, and we're really leaning into that heavily. So we're really following the general trend of large language models and the applications that sit on top of them.
Understood. So give us perhaps a couple of examples of what are the applications or use cases of how carriers and brokers are using these capabilities to unlock the next area of value.
I think there's probably two things. The most obvious area is to be able to replace the human orchestration which happens today with something that the system does on an autonomous fashion. So if you think about today, when you have this schema or this configuration, this is all of the data which you need to underwrite a particular risk. So when you come into Cytora and you say, well, we want to go live in business auto, we sit down with you and we say, okay, what are the data points which you need in order to basically get through that pre-underwriting phase and get to a position where you can make a decision as an underwriter? And once you've done that, we know what the target is. So with agentic AI, what you can do is every time you receive a communication in the intake, in this case from an agent or a broker, you can obviously evaluate the completeness of the schema versus the input. So earlier when I said, well, there's 40% of cases in this cyber line of business for this US carrier where there's missing information, the platform knows that. Because it has this concept of memory or state, it can actually automate the back and forth to the broker. So what you could do is you could actually allow the agent to draft and send the email to the broker, say, look, thanks for submitting this risk information. We just need these other couple of data points in order to be able to provide you with a decision. And if you think about it, that can happen in real time without waiting for that orchestration to happen. You could receive a response back maybe in minutes. And because you have this concept of state, we know, hang on a minute, we've already received an email for this submission. We have a submission in the system. We can link it, extract the new information and update the risk object. And so in many cases, carriers will be able to automate that back and forth.
Just on that one, Sam, because this is something obviously underwriters and operations teams complain quite a lot. It's like, well, there's always something missing. They have to check the completeness of what they've received, even if it's in digital form already, send back an email back to the broker. It takes effort and time. Do you also see in a scenario where this is happening in both sides, on the broker side and the carrier side, and that what we're talking about, that back and forth, is almost being done agentically?
Well, I mean, absolutely. I guess we always sort of have this sort of situation whereby we get really excited about the technology, and then obviously the industry needs to catch up. But of course, the interesting thing is, there are obviously two sides to the value chain in this particular instance. Obviously, that this could be going from insurers to reinsurers, but we're talking about agent brokers into carriers. And actually, many of the same issues which happen on the carrier side also exhibit themselves on the broker side. So, for example, they have an intake which largely they're not in control of from their end insureds, for example. They would obviously complain about lack of visibility into what's happening on the carrier side. And of course, as probably most listeners know, we were acquired by Applied Systems last September. And one of the things that I was most excited about was the ability to deliver on our long-term vision. Because we've really been trying to solve this problem of frictionless risk transfer on just one side of the market. And so if you imagine everything that I've described in terms of Agentic AI on the carrier side also could happen, and brokers are rapidly moving towards this this end state as well. And so actually, I think the big takeaway for me in the last 6 months is I live and breathe this technology every day. But even for me, like, the pace of change has been like surprisingly quick. And so it is not sci-fi anymore to imagine that you're going to have an AI agent on the broker side, so maybe sitting in the AMS, transacting with an AI agent on the carrier side, and obviously having human oversight on both sides. What does that actually mean in practice? It means when we send that email back to the broker with missing data, it might not actually be a human orchestrating the supply of the missing data. And so I think that's hugely exciting to be able to see a world where really the manual effort and orchestration is removed, and we're focused on judgment-based activity, both on the broker agent and carrier side. And whilst it obviously seems like quite highfalutin in terms of like the end vision for Cytora, we've often spoken right from the start about the underinsurance gap. And so really, I was reflecting on this the other day in software engineering. People say, well, there'll be no software engineers, the profession's dead. And it turns out actually in reality, the number of open vacancies for software engineers is higher than ever before. So interestingly, I think what will happen here is when people say, well, do you think there'll be less underwriters? Well, probably not, right? Because we're going to be continuing to underwrite more risk. And that's hopefully the idea. Instead of spending money on expense, we're able to, open up insurance to these underinsured segments as well. So yeah, super exciting.
Yeah, and you can imagine once you remove that friction of the exchange of data between brokers and agencies and the carriers, it's not just efficiency, right? It's the whole industry will go to a much more optimized matching of supply and demand, being able to share risks with more carriers, because that back and forth is done at a zero marginal cost, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, so I mean, obviously the initial focus has really been on driving efficiency gains, I would say, over the last few years. But with the new ways of working, obviously you can drive other benefits in terms of more granular data, because the cost of obtaining the data is obviously much lower, better risk selection, better premiums for the end insured, and ultimately more risk, which is uninsured.
Okay, so can we play back this first use case? I think this is really exciting, right? So basically, you're thinking a broker shares a risk submission with a carrier using this type of technology. On the carrier side, you've got an agentic platform that says, "Hey, thank you for the submission, but hey, I'm missing these 3 data points." That is done fully automatically, agentically, goes back to the broker. There's an agent on the broker who receives and understands the missing data required by the carrier, capture that information, which is quite often already existing in documents, previous policies, whatever it is, sent it back. Almost like that is like fully automated risk capture, right? I think, again, it's not just efficiencies. If you think that happens in seconds or minutes, then you're really impacting also the quote turnaround time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this will be hugely significant in terms of what it unlocks, and it'll be something which is hugely magical in terms of user experience, and will drive really significant change on both sides of the market.
Great. That you mentioned that there were two use cases that I stopped you, interrupted you several times on the first one. What was the other one you had in mind?
Yeah, I think this one is particularly fascinating because one of the things that we've seen in the market is that the method of fulfilling a request, so let's say a new business submission, is tightly tied to the channel. So, for example, email is associated with human underwriting. Straight-through processing is associated with completely automated digital rating. And I think one of the big unlocks here will be the decoupling of channel to the method of fulfillment. So, for example, with Agentic AI, what you can do is you can actually assess, irrespective of the channel that the risk came in, the most appropriate path for it to flow down. So even if it comes on the email channel, you're able to assess, is this digitally tradable? You're able to assess the data points required for that digital trading route. And then you're able to extract that data from the unstructured documents and fulfill the requirement there. Similarly, actually, one of the main challenges with straight-through processing is, well, there's actually two main ones with STP, which is often spoken about. One is like a one-shot process. So there's a set of data points that you need, and if you have the data, you can get a quote. And if you don't have the data, you can't get a quote. So imagine a situation whereby that back and forth that we spoke about earlier could actually be enabled for the STP channel. So Juan sent something in on email and there's one data point which is missing, which is critical. Instead of saying, computer says, no, we can't give you a quote, Juan, what we could do is we could say, Juan, just give us this one data point and we'll get you a quote. And because we have this state or memory, we can actually update the risk object and get the quote for you. The other interesting one is the ability to handle handoffs during STP processes. So one of the big complaints around digital trading and STP is when you basically go down a non-happy path and you need to be referred. At that point, generally, you have to start the whole process again, right? But imagine a situation where we have this state or memory and we seamlessly pass off risks that have come through the STP channel into a refer channel. And you have all of the risk objects that you've already created through the initial flow as well. So I think this is actually probably one of the kind of least appreciated benefits of Agentic AI, is decoupling the channel to the method of fulfillment as well.
And then you mentioned there STP, right? So obviously many or most carriers will have some sort of quote API. So, but we hear very often they are there, but they require 42 data points, whatever the number is, and almost never we receive the 42 data points, and then unless we receive the 42 data points, we are not able to produce a quote. Therefore, it either gets referred to a human underwriter or rejected. I know there's been a number of kind of capabilities that you've been working on to be able to close that data gap and maximize the number of quotes that you get back with. Can you mention some of those?
Yeah, so I think the interesting thing is that in sort of STP channels today, the onus is really on the broker or agent to provide all of those data points today, right? So all of the heavy lifting is on them, and this is obviously a barrier to kind of following this particular channel. One of the interesting things with Agentic AI and bringing it into, say, the Cytora platform is you can then make decisions around where the data is sourced from. So actually one of the interesting first lessons that we had when we built the platform is obviously we focused on this core problem of unstructured data to structured schemas. But when we started to work with customers on these underwriting workflows, we realized that there's other sources of data than the submission data. And that will be the case in STP as well. So we always talked about 4 sources of data: internal, external data with submission data, the ability to infer data that's not already there. So if somebody doesn't provide you with the exact NAICS code or class code, can you infer it with data that already exists in the other data sources, all tied together with entity resolution. And what you can do here is that even if the data is not full on the intake, you can make decisions around trying to find that data from other sources. So that could be from enrichment sources, so third-party data sets, open source data sets. But increasingly what I'm seeing is customers using web research or grounding in their schemas to basically undertake the often manual human-based research on Google and other websites to basically try and fill in the missing data. And often you can make a judgment call. It's like, okay, well, it's not come in the submission data, but this source is good enough for me to be able to produce a quote. So I think that web grinding, web research has probably been one of those kind of features that sort of slip through, but has been like one of the fastest adopted features in the platform. I know that you regularly enjoy demoing it. So that's kind of like the first thing to say on that side of things. And yeah, inside Cytora, you can basically do whatever you can normally do inside Cytora to basically fulfill the risk information. I would say that's kind of one of the main things that you can do on that side of things.
And on the second use case that you were talking about, the ability to like decouple the channel from how you actually handle or underwrite the risk, is it automated underwriting or human underwriting? Obviously, a key component of that evaluation is it's actually identifying like does the risk profile fit the STP, straight through processing type of workflow or not. I know you've released this concept of skills in the last few months. Can you talk a bit more about that and how that kind of moves the workflow from like kind of a rules-based triage to like more how an underwriter thinks?
Yeah, so the concept of skills has really been sort of made famous, I guess, by the work of Anthropic and their Claude models. And in fact, actually, skills is an open standard now. So one of the things we're focused on actually at Cytora in terms of how we build is this concept of no surprises and being standards based. So in as many areas as possible, we really favor open standards rather than proprietary closed standards. And so we've adopted this skill standard. If you go to agentskills.io, you can see the standard there. What that means is that these skills are interoperable actually between different models and different applications and different providers. And the best way of describing skills is really the ability to describe standard operating procedures. That's what I would say, right? So what we actually saw is a lot of people try and use fields in schemas, data fields, right, to be able to describe standard operating procedures. And again, it really is an extension of natural language prompting. Imagine that somebody came into your organization today and said, well, when we get a submission in and it reaches this set of data completeness, we trigger a risk engineering report. And when the report comes back in, we do these five things. This is something which you can define in a skill, which means that you can actually use the platform supported by the fact that you have this kind of constant schema, this structured output, this structured risk object, to be able to undertake larger parts of the end-to-end workflow. And generally, most things can be described in terms of standard operating procedures. And you can also describe the circumstances where you need to escalate it for human intervention or human judgment. And that would be quite common. And at the most basic level, skills are basically extended prompts. They're markdown files where you describe basically the steps to follow when you get to this particular situation. The other interesting thing about skills is they're, not to get too technical, they're progressively loaded. So you only load the skill when you need it. If you imagine that you might have like 10 or 15 or 20, standard operating procedures over the course of the life cycle of a submission, obviously you don't need all of those at the start. You only need certain ones as you go through the workflow and reach certain stages. So those exist as well. And interestingly, skills can be extended through the concepts of tools or resources. So if you think about a situation where somebody joins your business today, say, Juan, let me tell you what happens when risk comes in. The first thing you do is you get the name of the insured and you search in our clearance system to see if they exist. And that's just, a UI or an API where you provide some search terms and find it. Imagine you could actually give access to the agent, not only to those set of instructions, but the ability to access that tool. That's what we mean by tools and resources. And so really you can replicate a lot of what humans do today, particularly when it kind of is kind of sort of manual or orchestration based. And so, yeah, a few weeks ago, we launched skills in the platform, and you can augment your schemas with skills. So you can define them using the standard, and then on a particular field or field group, you can say, I want to always enable this skill or optionally enable the skill as well. What it also means is that you can deal with stuff which is kind of like in the outlier territory. I actually have no idea if CNA have a weird loss run format, but I always use CNA because they first come to mind. But let's say that you're processing loss runs, and everybody else, their loss runs look all the same, but CNA just do something completely strange. Imagine a situation with humans in your company. You say, Juan, just watch out for that CNA loss run. When it comes in, just remember you need to do X. skills also give you the ability to do that as well. So you can actually keep your schemas super clean and super kind of concise, and then kind of progressively load these skills as and when needed, depending on the context.
So really the two major breakthroughs, right, that you've delivered in the latest release of the platform is, I think, one is the ability to moving the platform from what you said, stateless to stateful, right, and being able to have a memory, understand if there's missing data, being able to automatically capture that missing data from either the web or sending a notification to the broker when it comes back, fulfilling the schema and pushing on. So really driving full automation up front. But the second one, which is with the kind of agentic orchestration and skills and tools and resources, you're really driving not just digitization up front, but really being able to orchestrate the whole workflow. Right. So yeah, I think, is that a good mental framework?
Yeah, I mean, we're really driving on both fronts. The interesting thing is that even if you don't adopt the stateful memory layer, you can leverage all of the benefits of the agentic digitization. So within Digitize, you can basically select the processor, which is used to conduct the digitization process, and you get all of the benefits even if you don't opt into the stateful kind of memory layer. The other interesting thing is that we spent a lot of time thinking about how to build this, because you kind of get into this situation where you have these kind of big paradigm shifts, and you kind of think, well, is this so big that we need to kind of completely change how we do things? The best example of that is when we went from supervised machine learning models, which did basically the majority of the risk digitization pre-LLMs, to large language models. And I sort of remember the day when I first interacted with like GPT 3.5, and I thought, oh, hang on a minute. This is good. This is what we do. And, we need to make a big bet here and actually, really change kind of the way that we do things. I think in terms of the stateful memory layer, what we've been really focused on is having this concept of layered values in the progressive layers of value in the platform. And so one of the key things is that if you're a Cytora customer today and you've invested a lot into these digitized schemas, transactions utilizes all of that stuff that you've already implemented in the platform. And so really it's just a different entry point within your state machine in transactions configs, which is basically your workflows. You trigger digitized schemas. So I think that's kind of been one of the things we've been really focused on, leveraging this kind of paradigm shift, but in a way which is not requiring a huge kind of technical uplift for customers.
Yeah, so really, it is not a new platform, right? It is just, as you said, I think you mentioned, the way you described it really resonates, is creating progressive layers of value that build on the existing ones. So, right, really clients can benefit from those without any disruption to what they've got already, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the only thing that surprises is the speed at which we've got to those progressive layer of values, which is super exciting. And I think I'm really, really fascinated to see what customers do with skills and agents in particular. We have these like really nice abstractions for customers in terms of the platform provides quite a lot of flexibility, but some really great guardrails. Schemas is a great example, but you just have just enough customization where you can always push the envelope, and it's really fascinating to see where customers kind of do things that maybe we didn't anticipate at the start, and this really kind of gives us insight to new use cases. I think age in particular will and skills will be a huge new level of abstraction, and so I'm sure that our customers will find new and creative ways to deliver use cases with the new configurability.
And if you had to say, like, what are the expected benefits, or what's expected impact that brokers and carriers will get from this new release?
So I think we will be able to continue to drive down on the efficiency and capacity benefits that you've already seen in risk digitization. I think that's kind of like you will just continue to see benefits in that area. Why do I say that? Because we're removing more and more manual effort in the process and more friction. So that will automatically create capacity. So where we remove capacity from certain parts of the workflow, it still remains in the orchestration there as we described. So you will get even greater benefits there. And you will really continue to be able to leverage the fact that the amount of business that you process isn't directly related to your headcount as well. So I think, this is one of the big things we spoke out over the years is decoupling scale or growth from headcount. I think the other interesting thing is, of course, the other side of the value chain will continue to feel greater benefits. So I think we have this concept of velocity as a moat in insurance. There's a lot of both anecdotal and empirical research around the importance of turnaround time. So, time to quote. This will feel even more significant in this context, because not only will they be able to obviously get the fast turnaround time for those ones where they provide sufficient data, but they'll be able to get to that quote faster in those circumstances when there's missing data as well. So I think that will be super important as well. And I think that the third one is, I think this is also kind of really important as we go through and start defining these standard operating procedures alongside the kind of the structured risk digitization, is you will get a much more consistent level of output, and this will be felt on both sides of the value chain. Again, like agents, AI agents don't get tired. They have a consistent way in terms of how they interpret things. You don't get a different kind of interpretation, one AI agent implication and another. And so I think you'll get continued benefits around more consistent risk selection and workflow execution. And I think the other thing, one other thing that I'm super excited about is, I kind of felt this myself personally, because like software engineers are at the forefront of the impacts of agentic AI, right? Like we have had almost the last 6 months is always sort of every kind of feel like we're in some existential crisis here. Like, my God, what is my job anymore? What is my identity and all these sorts of things? And sometimes you're kind of fearful of it, but actually what you realize is that it allows you to focus on higher level judgment based activities, right? Like the goal for most software engineers isn't the act of, writing the characters or writing the code. Is about orchestrating something, the machine, to be able to deliver on some outcome or some value or some use case. And I should imagine, I've never been an underwriter, but that same experience happens with other professions as well, and underwriting would be the same. And so what I really hope is that this will continue to deliver on the promise of freeing underwriters and other professionals in the insurance value chain from activity which is manual and could be automated by the machine, and allow them to focus on higher level judgment-based activities, which is still the purview of humans as well. So if there's underwriters out there listening, we feel this ourselves as engineers and product people, and we're really thoughtful about building products that can enable everybody to experience the benefits of AI.
This has been extremely exciting. And when is this a vision? Is this available? When can customers start using it?
So it's certainly not a vision. It's available in the platform today. I think we've maybe yesterday done an initial sort of teaser announcement of this kind of stateful platform, which we've named Autopilot. It's always fun to agree on a name externally when you're building products and the rest of the organization. But I'm really happy with where we settled, because I think it's a great articulation of basically the feature, this concept of always on automation with human oversight. And again, that's actually been a foundational principle right from the start. If you remember, one of the first things we did is we said we wanted human in the loop to be in the platform, right? This is a really big thing, and this kind of permeates every product decision we make. So this is in the platform today. We have customers already integrating against Autopilot, some early access customers. So if you're a Cytora customer now and you want access or demos, speak to your account team. If in doubt, you can always reach out to me personally. I'm very happy to demo the platform anytime, as customers know. And the same also applies to skills and agentic extraction. So in the last release of the platform, we released a new processor called Agent 001. As you can see, we're really great at naming things. We just generally start at one and keep incrementing. So Agent 001 is this new agentic loop processor, which can be augmented with skills. We started probably 6 to 8 weeks ago with the concept of agent instruction, which is like Claude MD for your schema. And this has been rapidly extended to the ability to define skills which can be enabled at field group level within a schema. Again, that's on a beta early access program. So if you're a Cytora customer and you need help and support in doing that, then get in contact with us. And I believe we have a big public release at the end of this month for basically everything we discussed today. So yeah, the future's here now. We're rapidly developing, obviously, the features, as you know. So we've got some really exciting stuff coming up. You can expect, rapid iteration on this level of the platform. I guess got two main things to kind of call out here. Very soon, we're going to be augmenting skills with the ability to call external tools. So this could be inbuilt tools in the platform, data enrichment, interacting with CRM, API services, clearance systems. The exciting thing working with applied systems is native into the AMS systems as well. We're doing lots of work on the distribution side. So in the US, Applied has a business unit called Ivans. They have a platform called Ivans Distribution Platform. So when we talk about decoupling channel to method of fulfillment, that's a big part of what we're doing in there. And I guess one area that we didn't talk about today in terms of this kind of stateful layer is once you start digitizing transactions, so submissions, claims, endorsements, etc., what you are able to do is to build up a connected view of the risk or insured over time. So imagine that you get a submission into the platform today through autopilot, which incepts, and you can actually tell us if the policy did incept or not. And then 6 months down the line, an endorsement comes in, we say, oh, hang on a minute. We already know about this policy because it incepted through here. We've already digitized the intake. And so you can actually drive more and more automation over time by having this kind of connected view of data. And I think that'll be particularly exciting for those customers that utilize us for both underwriting and claims, which is traditionally two very siloed parts of the business from both a technological and operational perspective.
Sam, it's been fantastic as always to chat to you and see how the platform is developing so fast and how customers are benefiting from all the new releases. Well, I guess would love to hear from customers in the next few weeks and to see the impact. Thank you so much for joining me today.
That's okay. I'll pencil 2031 in for the next invite.
Next one. I think I was reflecting. I think you have to write a book. That's the missing before you get invited to the next episode.
I'll get on it.
But yeah, really good to see you, Sam.
Thanks. Cheers.
Thank you.